All statements and opinions expressed by guests of the Adult in the Room podcast are strictly their own and do not necessarily reflect the beliefs or opinions of the host, producers, or advertisers. All interviews are presented in their most complete possible form in the interests of free speech. No statements should be interpreted as financial, legal, or medical advice. Listener and viewer discretion are strongly advised.
It's the Adult in the Room podcast with Victoria Taft. That's me. Welcome to the Adult in the Room podcast with Victoria Taft. It's great to be here, and I'm glad you are too. Here is the part of the official bio for Jonathan Choe of the Discovery Institute. And it goes like this. Journalist and senior fellow, Center on Wealth and Poverty. Jonathan Choe is a journalist, senior fellow, Discovery Institute Center on Wealth and Poverty, covering homelessness issues for its Fix Homelessness initiative. Now, prior to joining Discovery, Choe spent several years as one of the lead reporters at Como TV, consistently the top-rated television station in Seattle. But that's not even close. You know, that's the official bio, okay? I didn't even give you the whole thing, because right now it doesn't really matter, because it's what Jonathan's doing now that does matter. And his backstory also we'll talk about as well. But that's not even close, I should say, to the story of this reporter in one of America's largest and most consequential cities in the country. Sometimes you think about, what happens in New York or LA is what's going to happen to the rest of the country. Indeed, I think Seattle is in that rarefied air or subterranean level. I don't know. But it is what happens in Seattle tends to metastasize, and not for the good. I used to say that of Portland, and it's absolutely true. So it is an avatar, I believe, of the West Coast, West Coast, as I call it. Jonathan's been forced into the culture wars for his journalisming, and I mean that in the best way. He's been talking about Seattle's homeless, Antifa, Proud Boys, communists, anarchists, city leaders, doing good things, doing not so good things, and all manner of activists permeate the culture, permeate the leadership in this city that they call the Emerald City. So we'll go over his experiences, his takeaways on how to solve some of the more intractable problems in our cities, because I think what happens in Seattle is happening elsewhere. He's probably seen he's seen the worst of things, honestly, and he's not that old. He's a kid. He would say he's not, but I'm older than he is, so I can say that. We're going to talk about how the far, far left and the person of one of the Adult in the Room podcast's guests and his friends and more cost Jonathan his job at corporate media and how it has now freed him to speak. And by the way, that same person was also part of at least one, if not more, of the attacks on our friend Andy No. So, Antifa John, he's just a very prolific guy. Some background. Antifa and Black Lives Matter overtook the public square in 2020 in Seattle, though it has been sort of gone away a little bit, sort of faded in the background. It's still right there. You can tell. It has in fact entrenched itself in some of the decisions and the mindsets of people in the government. The literal takeover back in 2020, remember that the Summer of Love? That part at Capitol Hill, it's certainly the city where Jonathan Choe was reporting, and it has changed the place of Seattle. It has changed Jonathan as well, I would hazard to guess. Here's what they came up with. Defunding police, freely allowing drugs in public, pooping and peeing with impunity on the public square, and the takeover of the homeless issue now. Remember, we've talked about this before. The takeover of the homeless issue by Antifa, or at least they're trying. It all follows the Summer of Love, the revelations thereof, and now informs us on what we are seeing today and what we should do about it. So the leaders, they really don't know much. I really feel like they don't know much. They don't know what they believe. They don't know the law, or at least what they want to change about it. They have no core values to hold fast to when they were challenged by these extremists and Antifa and Black Lives Matter. They were made to be embarrassed for their lot instead of standing proud and working toward a solution. And Jonathan Choe saw all this. And then he was victimized by it, although I don't think he considers himself to be a victim, because he broke through and stood up for himself while in search of what's right and what's true. You could call it a search for the soul of the city, and by extension, a lesson for most American cities. And here's just one example before you meet Jonathan Choe.
With the stars and stripes proudly on display, the city of Burion's getting ready to host its 100th annual Independence Day celebration.
Spend some time outside in the sun.
Families, children, and tourists usually line downtown streets to get a glimpse of the floats and marching bands. But this year, the parade route is being changed
for everyone's safety
to avoid seeing this. A homeless encampment that's now close to 20 tents deep.
So it's best just to err on caution.
Set up on Southwest 152nd Street near the entrance of Grocery Outlet and Dollar Tree.
I don't believe it should be in our downtown commercial area.
Deborah George leads Discover Burien, a coalition of business owners responsible for making this last-minute decision. George says they had no other choice but to alter the parade route.
We're going to turn left on 4th. And just head straight into Town Square Park.
Since the city is refusing to remove the encampment, that's because Burien does not have an illegal camping ordinance, except at public parks.
I mean, it's ugly and it's not safe. We get a lot of crazy people.
It's led to several unintended consequences. Just in the past few weeks, this inferno engulfed multiple tents. Nearby business owners say they're struggling with a spike in thefts related to this encampment.
How do you run a business like this?
Oh, it's hard. I got customers that don't want to come in. They don't feel safe coming around here no more, you know?
What you got your little punk-ass phone for, bitch?
People with clear signs of mental illness are roaming this area more often, and the open-air drug use is out of control.
This is a crisis moment.
During my interview with Mayor Sofia Aragon, several men were brazenly smoking fentanyl right behind her.
The open-air drug use, I mean, you see it with your own eyes.
Yes.
Aragon says creating a new ordinance to address this situation will be up for discussion, but there are no assurances it passes, since the council is so divided on this issue.
Wow. So they changed the 4th of July route, you know, the big parade, woo-woo, American flags everywhere, to accommodate the homeless community because it was easier to put people out who are used to going to the regular parade route than it was to get homeless, quote unquote, homeless addicts out of the way. Jonathan Choe, welcome to the Adult in the Room podcast. How are you today?
Thank you for having me, Victoria, and that intro. You pretty much summed it all up. That's been my last 3 years here in Seattle.
Honestly, how crazy is this? What is that? Tell me what's going on in that video. Tell me, sort of set it up for us.
Well, let me start with a very quick update. The good news for the good people of Burien is that the council finally came to their senses and voted to at least consider a ordinance now that would ban public camping in that city. So there still needs to be another vote at the next council meeting, so they're crafting the language. But yeah, basically, you have this city that was totally caught off guard by this homeless crisis because the council is made up of some quote-unquote progressives and activist council members who felt as though removing the homeless without offering some sort of shelter option. And by the way, the homeless there in that city have all been offered congregate shelters, you know, the places where you go with mats and so on and so forth. But these council members feel like these campers deserve studios and apartments. So they're long-term, so, you know, they don't end up back in the streets. Obviously, that's pie in the sky. So until then, they don't want to move anybody. So this clash of ideology is ultimately what's led to this situation. So this isn't just Burien, it's all across Washington state.
And Oregon and California as well. This is the problem, and it's a result of the Boise decision, but it's not really the result of the Boise decision. That's a Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals decision in which you had to offer, cities must now offer some sort of shelter before they can clear someone off public property. And so what has happened is, as you've rightly pointed out, all those people have been offered shelter. And so the city's done its job. So now you can clear them out, but they never do it.
Right. And what's also happening, Victoria, unfortunately, is that, homelessness is an issue that I never thought I'd be getting myself into full time. This is now my beat 24/7, basically. But that decision, Martin versus Boise, is also being misinterpreted by a lot of lawmakers. And I think, unfortunately, intentionally in some cases, because nowhere does it say that offers of shelter must be made in that particular city. In other words, homeless outreach workers have literally offered rides to the homeless, every single one, to nearby cities like Kent, Seattle, and Tacoma, and they've all refused. But city leaders keep saying, well, we don't have enough shelter. So do you see it's turned into this information war? And that's what I've been trying to uncover. And that's kind of, the string I've been pulling and seeing. I'm like, this is insane.
Yeah. And it's a solvable problem, because you know how you solve it for most of these folks? You just tell them to leave. You just tell them, because you know what? They got there somehow, because they have a brain in their head. They have phones. They know where to go. There's a reason they're in Seattle. There's a reason they're in California and Portland. It's because they can be, because they're indulged. And that which is rewarded is repeated. And that is the thing that these guys just can't get their heads around. Well, they're poor and they're addicts and they're this and they're that. Great. Get the addicts help. Clear out the guys that aren't supposed to be there, which is to say people who are pooping all over the streets and camping on sidewalks and all that stuff. And then how about you, leaders, go do your jobs that you were hired to do. Just let these people go because you think you're so smart. Well, guess what? So are they. So are the homeless.
What I've really learned and seen firsthand now is that you've got a lot of these leaders who are just virtue signaling. Many of them have never actually been out there on the streets. I've been out there 24/7 now, again, on the front lines. And I ask these homeless men and women, are you aware of the laws? Are you aware of the news cycle? Are you aware of what the city leaders are saying? And for the most part, they say yes. And they know that the laws are not being enforced. So it's not a matter of crafting new laws. It's a matter of enforcing the ones already on the books. And that's not happening because of these woke council members and woke elected officials.
So you're out there on the beat 24/7 with the Discovery Institute, and you are seeing what is going on. And what's happening out there?
Well, this is what's so scary. And we can get into more about this, later when we talk about what's going on with mainstream media. But basically, after a 20-year career working in corporate news, on air in markets like Chicago, Minneapolis, Boston, my hometown, and now Seattle, one of the fastest growing media markets in America, what I'm seeing is that the actual story is not fully being told. Because a lot of the stories that I'm starting to see on the ground that are actually happening with this homeless crisis and drug addiction crisis, and I always make that distinction because they're two separate things that unfortunately have a nexus. You can't sell diaper ads next to somebody overdosing every single day on fentanyl. And that's why you're not going to see this on ABC, NBC, CBS, and even Fox News at times. A lot of this stuff gets blurred out. But now that I've been unleashed, and I'm so thankful, I'm never going back to corporate media. I am able now to show the raw realities on the ground because now we're going video first, okay? And what that means is, the elected officials, when I show these devastating videos, they can't deny it any longer, right? It's actually happening. So that's why I got the saying now, Victoria, the video don't lie. And the worst kept secret, I do this simply all with an iPhone. And now I'm going to be trying to empower others, especially neighbors. Record everything you see. That's the only way you're going to be able to hold your elected officials accountable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they can't deny a photo. They may say it's been edited or unfairly put in context or what have you. They can say all of that. But still, there's a picture. There's a guy. He's got sores all over his legs. He's cooking up some fentanyl. He's bent over like a taco. I mean, these are things that are happening. This community of so-called homeless people are being riven. This community is riven by drug addiction. What do you say about that particular aspect of this? And how is the city's indulgence made it worse? I ask that. It's a loaded question, obviously. I want you to just tee off on it. If I'm wrong, let me know. But the fact is, I don't think I'm wrong.
Yeah, no, Victoria, I see the homeless crisis, this drug addiction crisis, the mental illness crisis, the same way you do. Unfortunately, right now, you've got most of the city leaders and elected officials in these, democratic cities who are following what's being called housing first. And it's the strategy where billions of dollars have now been poured into from at the federal level, where we want to stabilize the homeless. We want to put them into housing, then deal with all the issues. So you keep on hearing this narrative. It's all about affordable housing. It's all about getting people housing. We've got to build more housing. No, that's a lie. The root causes are mental illness, drug addiction, and broken relationships. And this is really the first time now. I never thought I'd be saying this. I'm the kid who barely got out of college, okay? Now I'm in an elite think tank. But I've now had time to think and peel back the layers. I'm not under constant deadline pressure. Now I'm seeing what's really happening. And these elected officials are just drinking the Kool-Aid. And here's the kicker. It's because at the federal level, unless these nonprofits, these cities follow the housing first strategy, they're not going to get the federal funding. It's all about the money. The homeless industrial complex is real, Victoria.
Oh, it totally is. We've talked to Kevin Dahlgren of I Heart Seattle before, and his work in Seattle and Portland. And I mean, he's all about, calling it what it is. When it became to have money attached to the effort, they went, oh, we're all in. And then what do? They say, well, you can get a grant as long as you use the right words and you say the right things, and you're going to do housing first. And that's it, because we've already decided it's an outcome-based grant system. So, So,
Victoria, it's not a matter of money any longer. It's a matter of now reallocating that money. You see, people keep saying, we need more money. We need more taxpayer dollars.
We don't need more money.
Taxpayer dollars are being wasted, as you know. And guess what? This is the inconvenient truth that the mainstream media is not covering. Because homelessness, when I worked in 20 years in corporate media, this is not an issue people want to see on television. They don't want to cover it, yet I believe it truly will be for the next decade one of the top 3 most important issues in this entire country. Because it's not just Seattle, Portland, LA, or some of these other bigger cities on the West Coast. It's everywhere now. It's in New York. It's in Chicago. It's in Boston. Nobody's talking about it, and that's what we're trying to expose.
Fentanyl made it worse. There was meth. Meth was bad. Fentanyl comes in, makes it worse. Now there's tranq. Talk about the different gradations of the drugs.
Victoria, look, I'm not a pharmaceutical expert or a drug dealer, but, I've had to kind of learn on the fly here.
Although you could, with as much time as you do on the street, you probably could make a good living.
I know drug dealers. I know addicts. I've seen pretty much every class of drug on the streets now, from cocaine to fentanyl, commonly now called blues. Get this, just last year, the Seattle Police Department, barely, I guess confiscated, fentanyl pills, just a few hundred, I'd say. This year, they say they've confiscated now more than 1 million pills on the streets. So, look, we keep focusing on the, addicts and the addiction, but we've got to start talking about the source. The cartels are coming over with the stuff, flooding our porous borders, but the source material is coming from China. This is a huge story. Again, nobody wants to talk about. Inconvenient truth. Even Brookings Institute, another think tank, did a deep dive study on this. Look, if China, we saw what they did with COVID. They literally shut down the entire country. If they wanted to shut down the flow of the fentanyl ingredients, they could do it right now. But I truly believe they are starting another opium war. They are trying to destabilize America from within. This is not a conspiracy theory, Victoria. You just don't hear about this in mainstream media. But that's what I'm seeing. Again, I'm seeing all the data. I'm connecting the dots. Unfortunately, back to the streets now, fentanyl pills, they were like $10 a year ago. Earlier this year, it was down to $5. Now it's down to $1 a pill. And all you need is 3 or 4 to pretty much have these men and women just totally wiped out on the streets. We're losing an entire generation. And you were talking about classes of drugs now. These, dealers are now trying to take shortcuts and get more bang for their buck. So they're lacing them with other ingredients like xylazine, which is like cattle and horse tranquilizer in these fentanyl pills. But unfortunately, the consequences now, along with overdosing and dying, it's literally melting your skin and causing sores. because of this itch, and people are scratching off their skin. And Narcan won't even reverse the, what you see with Trank. This is insane that this is happening on America's streets.
What percentage of the people you see out on the street are male and female?
I mean, I don't know what the exact breakdown is. The vast majority are men that I see, but I definitely see my fair share of women as well. And unfortunately, a lot of these women are being, trafficked out there. And again, it's not a housing issue, because I'm working on another deep dive investigative piece because where I followed a homeless person into one of these apartments. But get this, they keep the apartment, but they go back to the encampment to hang out and do drugs. Nobody's talking about that piece. Nobody's holding anyone accountable. And I asked these addicts, why do you keep going back? And here's what they say. It's because that's still my community. Getting back to what I said, it's about addressing broken relationships, the mental illness, and the addiction. Otherwise, all you're doing is warehousing people out of sight, out of mind, and the politician can say, check, we house them. It's a political win. That's all it is, but you're not dealing with the root issues.
Right. It's warehousing somebody so they can go and overdose in quiet.
Yep.
And nobody has to see it.
And our streets are clean and no one else has to see it, yet it's happening.
Yeah. Yeah. Are they required to be sober in these warehouses that the government's buying for them?
That is a great question. I would say that the vast majority of the ones now being built in Seattle, at least in King County, are what are called low barrier. What that means is you can do drugs in these facilities because of the whole harm reduction strategy. They're not looking for actual, recovery. They're looking to maintain. Think about, again, the millions of dollars in the pharmaceutical, this harm reduction industry is making, all the meth pipes, all the needles, all the Narcan simply being shoved down these people's throats. So again, it's not a focus on recovery. It's a focus on just maintaining. That is sinister, Victoria.
Harm reduction. Can you tell people what that is? We've discussed it previously on the Adult in the Room podcast, but doesn't hurt to hear it again.
Yeah, look, in a nutshell, it sounds great. It's all about, hey, let's keep people alive. Let's make sure the addicts don't get diseases. So let's just give them these supplies to do them in a clean, safe environment. Well, guess what? It's not working. But they have won, that entire industry has won the messaging war, because the vast majority now of public health policies are based off of harm reduction. Again, what they're doing is they're not focused on interventions. They're not focused on requirements. When's the last time you talked to an addict who said, okay, I'm ready now? Look at Joe Biden. President Joe Biden even admits for his son Hunter, there was an intervention. Why does Hunter Biden deserve an intervention, but others are just left on the streets to make a choice when they're ready? Meanwhile, we'll just keep giving them supplies so they can do their, drugs in a safe environment. Come on.
So Kevin Dahlgren, when he was on the program, said that he had tried to intervene with another person from We Heart Seattle to help a guy who'd said, I'm ready to go to treatment. And Antifa stopped him. So these Stop the Sweeps people, which is the latest iteration of Antifa, stopped him. And the next day, the guy overdosed and died. So they actually have a body count. They continue to have a body count, of course. Can you talk about that? About Antifa's role in all of this and setting up tents and all that jazz? I think people would just be amazed.
Victoria, where do I begin? Let me just quickly set this up by saying I'm a Boston kid. I grew up on the East Coast. JFK Democratic Liberal. Okay, you know what that means? I'm showing my political stripes right now. That means even if I disagreed with you, we'd agree to disagree, then we'd cross the aisle and find a solution for the greater good. I moved to Seattle 3 years ago. It's so far left, I think I might be a conservative and a GOP Republican now. Okay? I'm technically
like
a registered
independent,
just for the record. Okay? I voted for both sides, multiple candidates. I'm an issues voter, just so you understand. But I try to be fair and objective. Getting back to Antifa, I didn't even know what Antifa was. But now, after 2020, BLM, the riots, and what they did, these are far left anarchists who want to destabilize America. They hate capitalism. They want to bring in Marxism and communism, and they will do it by any means necessary. Their key is about destabilizing. And now I've seen their next iteration, as you've talked about. I'm one of the few reporters talking about this because there's a group out here, in fact, not just Seattle and in other places as well. For some reason, they've decided to take on the homeless crisis and now add their flag to that, along with the trans agenda, along with BLM. I mean, pretty much that flag now pretty much encompasses all the poor and the marginalized and every group that feels like they've been left behind. So anyway, they've taken up this homeless flag, and what they're doing is, unless it follows their strategy, they are totally against you and they want to undercut you. They're not about recovery. They're not about getting, interventions. They're all about leaving people on the streets until they're quote unquote ready. But what they're really trying to do is to leave the homeless people there to say capitalism is failing. It's not
That's
working.
right.
We need something
That's
better.
it. You got it.
Yeah.
You got it.
Think about that. And what's so crazy is that Mayor Bruce
I'm
Harrell here in
laughing.
Seattle, he's a moderate Democrat, okay? I don't necessarily align with all his values. I think he's a good man. He's definitely trying to change Seattle. He's sweeping regularly because this is illegal camping. There are so many unintended consequences by allowing encampment to flourish. But get this, every time Seattle crews move a tent or an encampment, Stop the Sweeps will come in. Instead of getting these men and women into shelters, they'll just move them to another part of the city, causing the cycle to continue. And it's perfectly legal. How is this being allowed in America? And no one else is talking about it. That's why I keep going out there. Of course, they hate me. They target me all the time. They spread misinformation online about me, but I'm still here. This is a calling for me, Victoria. I got to keep exposing what's going on. There's no other way.
They made you a bit of a crusader, and it's not your fault. It's theirs. I mean, look, you're backed up. Like, I don't, what? All of a sudden. So let's watch one of your videos that went national on a particular encampment with a special amenity.
So you made this whole area?
I did.
Okay, when did this pool come in? You got to tell me when the pool came in.
It came in about a week ago now.
A week ago?
Yeah.
Where's the water coming from?
This is, we did use the hydrant. We got the water, filled it up.
It's chlorinated?
Sure.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it's chlorinated.
So I can take a dip if you let me. Okay, we can do some water sports if you want. Okay, you've got the beach balls and everything.
Yeah. I also added some stairs here. This is a walkway.
What if a kid accidentally wanders into this area?
So what I wanted to do was make sure that the fencing was high enough so that it would control any of that from happening. So I started building the fence down here.
My window faces the encampment.
Well, they come up and trying to pick a fight.
Just filth and garbage and rats. One night I got up because I could hear this metal saw and gunfire all the gunfire at night.
What kills me, Jonathan, I mean, excellent. That story went national. They have amenities now at the encampments. I mean, have you ever seen, what other stuff have you seen that have been just mind-blowing at the encampments?
Well, let's just stay at that encampment. Aside from that swimming pool, there's a deep wooded area. There's literally a guy, and I posted this just the other day, of a homeless man, really talented. He's an artisan, he's an architect. He literally built and dug an underground tunnel system. He's starting it. He wants to live underground, like the mole people. Like, this is crazy. But I look at his work, and it's amazing. And I asked him point blank, why don't you get a job? He goes, I can't, man. I can't. And he admits,
I didn't go to school. Well, he said it in Spanish. I didn't go to school.
Yeah, but he's so talented, and he's done. But he also has this addiction. So you have these men and women, and I want to be very clear. I'm not here to demonize the homeless. Not all homeless are criminals. I think most reasonable people know that. These are our mothers, our fathers, our brothers, our sisters, uncles, aunts. Everyone has a story. There's a wide spectrum of how people ended up on the streets and why they remain on the streets. With that said, I truly believe we've got to take the time, one person at a time, to hear everyone's story and find out why they're there and get them off the streets, to intervene. This guy, Jesse, who built that underground tunnel system that I'm talking about, I truly believe he just needs somebody to come around him, to help him walk, hold his hand throughout the journey in this process. Because again, I truly believe one of the issues here is the lack of community for these people, a lack of purpose, a lack of reason to get up in the morning. And our neighbors, our society, we've got to start looking at it that way.
Yeah, they need something to do. They need to not be on drugs, obviously. And, you're mentioning how China's basically bombing us, if you will, with fentanyl. I mean, most of those guys you see on the street, those are fighting-aged males. I mean, you ever think about that?
I mean, think about all the innovation we're losing. Think about all the workers we're losing. I just thought about that the other day as I was leaving that encampment in West Seattle. All of these people are just being left out here. And all of our enemies, this is great. We want to destabilize and take out an entire generation. Well, mission accomplished. That's what they're doing right now.
Yeah. And these poor people, the externalities of these things, as the left always so loves to talk about, the externalities are frightened people who can't conduct their lives, people who thought they were living in a nice place, and all of a sudden there's gunfire and there's worry that this filth that's being created will cause disease that will continue to, it will escape the camp. Cholera's next. I mean, it's going to be. How is it that the city, county, state continue to overlook what is so clearly a public health problem in these camps?
Yeah, and we've tried to call out, and I have called out and confronted Governor Jay Inslee, but for whatever reason, he's not running again. But his legacy, he wants to talk about climate change and the environment, but we keep pointing out the inconvenient truth. What about the environmental damage happening in your deep woods? The beautiful evergreens being decimated, the trash, the needles, the feces going into the salmon waters right now. I mean, this is out of control. And that encampment with the pool, senior citizens live right across the street. One of the most vulnerable groups. Do they deserve to spend their golden years this way? This is unbelievable.
Plus that pool, which I understand is gone now, but that was an attractive nuisance.
Well, technically, it's been deflated. It's still there. There was a hammer fight, and it got punctured, right? Of course there was a fight. Two homeless guys got into a fight, swung a hammer at each other, and accidentally punctured the pool. I mean,
oh, man.
You can't make this stuff up, Victoria, and that's why I've got to show the video.
So now you were doing this at the Discovery Institute, and then ultimately, what do you plan to do with this information that you're accumulating?
Well, look, as I said, Discovery Institute is kind of this, white shoe think tank, and, they write papers.
You ever look around and go, what the hell am I doing here?
Yeah, and I'm like, what are you guys, I'm a guy who barely got out of college. Everyone at my think tank, they're like, have Harvard and Yale degrees, and, I'm like, I'm not, college ready in some cases, I feel. With that said, I think my president really took a gamble, and it's paying off because they're now starting to realize that you've got to get into the digital age, especially because you can no longer rely on mainstream media to tell the truth. And most of the innovative think tanks, at the end of the day, their jobs are to get in front of these trends and to spot trends 2-3 years ahead. And we feel like we're on the cutting edge right now. Again, with these video narratives, I would argue we're the only think tank in America right now focused primarily on the homeless crisis. And we're in a great position where people are starting to see our work. There's now a proof of concept. So we're trying to expand. Look, I'm flattered that after 20 years in television news that, I still have opportunities despite the way I exited Como News, the ABC affiliate in Seattle. But there's a dearth of journalists right now. The best journalists right now are leaving the industry for all kinds of reasons. The conditions just suck. Corporate media's just a joke. People are going into PR making double. And now you're left with these young kids who are coming in. But even then, I talk to the journalism schools right now, and there's a pipeline problem. Fewer journalists are going into at least television news because they're seeing all the success YouTubers, TikTokers are having. Why make, $15 an hour in the middle of nowhere market when you could become an influencer making arguably hundreds of thousands of dollars online? That's this paradigm shift right now, Victoria.
And let's talk a little bit we'll talk about your exit from Como News, and then we'll also get into that with this video. Here you are asking a councilwoman in whose district the plethora of these camps, these homeless camps and drug addiction camps have proliferated, why she's not doing anything about it.
Councilmember Morales, could I just ask you a couple questions about the CID? The homeless crisis, drug addiction crisis continues to rage out of control in your district. What's the plan for that?
The city is working on all kinds of issues for addressing homelessness and the treatment centers that are needed.
Your constituents say you're not showing up for the CID when they call for problems. How would you like to respond to that?
Sir, you're not a reporter. Please leave. Yeah.
How about South Seattle? All these RVs are starting to pile up in the 7-Eleven lot now. Are you aware of that, council member? Do you have any plan to address the...
You're not a reporter. Please leave.
Do you have any plan for that?
You're not a reporter. Please leave.
Councilmember Morales, are you concerned about any of the other candidates running in your district?
You're not a reporter. Please leave. So that's the rap against you. You're not a reporter. Please leave, even though you're up for a bunch of awards this year against your old comrades and that sort of thing, corporate media, which I find deliciously ironic. And so this is what the Seattle ruling class has decided, that you're not a real reporter. So why do they say that?
Well, it depends who you ask. Anyone who I try to hold accountable, like Councilmember Tammy Morales, who represents, I keep referencing the CID, that's the Chinatown International District, with just one of the most marginalized communities to begin with, now dealing with the vast majority of the drug addiction and homeless, because it's turned into a human dumping ground. And this all has happened under Tammy Morales and her failed policies. And the politicians, getting back to your questions, who say I'm not a journalist, are the ones I'm holding accountable, or at least trying. A lot of these Seattle, politicians haven't really faced a bulldog journalist. And I'm a Boston kid. I'm a fighter, and I'm pretty direct. And there's something about the culture out here. So I think there's a lot of benefits. People say, oh, you're not from Seattle. How do you know the market? Well, I think what my advantage is, I bring an outsider's perspective, right? So I don't really have kind of this bias, and I'm just trying to fairly and objectively go after everybody, whether you're a Dem or a Republican, independent, whatever. If your policies suck, I'm going to ask you about them. If your policies aren't working, I'm going to ask you about them. And they're not working for Tammy Morales. So the strategy for some of these politicians who I question is to discredit and dismiss. But I'm not going anywhere, Victoria. So that's why I continue to be a thorn in the side. And I wish others in mainstream media do that as well. But they're not here in Seattle for some reason.
They have to make sure they get the next press release, and they might get taken off the email list if they don't.
Correct.
If they do
it's
that.
About access journalism now.
Yes, it is. And this is the one video. Of course, there have been multitude of videos that I have really appreciated that you've done. And by the way, Choe Show, CHOE Show, Choe Show is where you find him and follow him on Twitter. Jonathan Choe, what a treasure. But this is the one. Every once in a while, I look at this video and I go, yeah. Number 5, Kenny.
Are you just passing by?
No, dude, I'm doing interviews. That's why I wasn't sure who you guys were. I've never seen you guys here. So I'm just trying to figure out where the fire was. Was it in this spot, do you know?
We're talking about something else.
Oh, good. Cool. I am.
Credentials. Then you should go, dude. If you're just a random walk-by guy.
I'm not a random walk-by guy.
Credentials. Where's your press credentials?
Oh, there's a guy in there.
That's called my name. You can look me up online. That's where my credentials are.
You need to have credentials like they do.
No, I don't. You're telling me how to do my job now?
Yeah.
Well, you can't. You're not my boss. Who the hell are you?
I'm here.
Good for you. Call the police. Please, let's see how long it takes.
Please call the police. See how long it takes. I'm not a walk-by guy. It's truly one of my favorite ones, only because you just told that guy, who are you to tell me how to do my job? I loved that. Where's your credential? Well, I have a credential right here.
Yeah, Victoria, this is what I deal with every single day. It's not even an exaggeration, and that's why I have to document these moments. But I mean, that sums it up right there. That's the virtue signaling. That's the homeless outreach worker thinking that they know how to do it best. I'm just a journalist trying to do my job as well, and they want to tell me how to do my job. I mean, this is just out of control. It's about controlling the narrative. I refer to an information war. That's what it is. I'm disrupting their narrative because I'm actually showing what's happening on the ground. And my reference to police, I'm 100%, pro-police. Let's call out the bad apples. Sure. Should there be reform in some areas? Absolutely. And should we hold the police department accountable? Yeah, absolutely. But we all know that the defund the police movement was a failed social experiment. And that's why it now takes hours for the police to show up. And that's why I said, go ahead, call the police. Let's see how long it takes for them to show up. Because they're not going to show up. And that's the sad reality. So I'm on my own. I know that. And so do the residents of Seattle. We're on our own.
I've heard a really persuasive argument about how men need to be, they need to stand up. And when they show their willingness to square up on somebody, people tend to leave them alone. That's exactly what you do. You are physically fit and you don't take any shit. And that is one of the things I really appreciate about you, Jonathan, there is room for that kind of journalism, especially when you're in a dangerous spot as you are on the streets. A, do you do that intentionally? B, how do you stay safe?
Well, I have good track shoes. Let's just say that. I ran track in high school, so I still got it, I think. Definitely need to lay off the Doritos because it's catching up as I get a little older out there on this beat. But look, all joking aside, I don't carry weapons. I just try to use street smarts. I build relationships and trust. And let me point out very clearly right now, I'm not concerned about the homeless. I'm not concerned about the drug addicts. My concern every single day are about people like that who get in my way and try to disrupt my coverage and the far left activists. Those are the only people who have tried to undercut my reporting. Okay? So I feel safe out there for the most part. Are there situations I avoid? Yeah, absolutely. Should I be avoiding more? Probably. But, this is part of the beat. It's part of the job. And also, that's one of the reasons why I feel like I've created sort of this moat around me, because there just isn't enough of this type of journalism being done, but it has to be done. And I'm going to continue to do it until we deal with these issues. We solve this problem.
Mm-hmm. There's another video I want to play here at this point because it really jibes with what we're talking about right now. And it's how this was at a trans issue. Anyway, I'll let you explain what it is. And let's talk about how you deal with these people.
Of the library, a teacher paddled my bare butt for reading while they crossed their fingers behind their back, apparently.
Absolutely. What about being inclusive?
Over and over.
What about inclusivity? Hey, Grandma, what about being inclusive?
Stay clear!
So this is another public service announcement. We had one speaker, and we have a few more speakers that are coming up with their face coverings. And that's because
Can you not touch me, dude?
You're walking into me.
Dude, don't touch me, all right? Dude, don't touch me, all right?
I'm not touching you.
All right, dude. Calm down. I'm just trying to walk. I'm walking this way.
So am I.
And I started looking for a community like me that I could come into.
Panther Party, interesting. You're hitting. It's not a good idea.
I apologize for that.
Yeah, it's violence.
That's not cool.
That's what these folks do.
Yeah, well,
It's okay.
yeah.
It's just a phone. You're touching me, man.
Thanks, guys.
I just want to get in that area.
Move on the other way.
No, I'm just reporting what they're doing.
This guy assaulted me. You saw that. You did. You did. You smacked this phone out of my hand. It's been recorded, sir. This is a public place. I want to get there. Yeah.
You know me, I'm honest.
Yep, he saw it too.
at Evergreen? How gay is Evergreen?
I just want to be in the public just like everyone else, but they keep touching me. Yes, sir.
What's happening is the closer both sides get to each other, the
Right.
more it aggravates.
That makes sense.
You don't want that, so you can get just as much from over there when they're not.
It's hard to hear the audio. Do you know what I'm saying?
Oh,
I don't want you to get punched in the face or anything.
Thank you. As long as you enforce it if it happens. That's all that matters. Thank you.
okay. So it's Antifa, typically the trans Tifa, as we're calling them now, when they go out there to do their thing. And you got grandma with several people with rainbow umbrellas who are preventing you from taking video. You've got people who are in your way. It's stopping your advance. And then and invariably what will happen is you'll get the air horns stopping you from being able to get any meaningful sound. How do you deal with these people? Oh, and the cops don't even help you.
Yeah, and
because you're causing the problem.
Yeah, they're all gaslighting me. I mean,
jeez.
Victoria, I mean, first of all, props to your producers, your team for finding all these videos, but it was a perfect segue. This is exactly what I'm talking about. I go to these, public places. I'm trying to cover this event. I'm also trying to get both sides. By the way, there was a dueling rally that day against a bill that essentially would hide children and take away parents' rights. So there were a bunch of parents on one side, and then you had this trans Antifa group along with the Democrats pushing this bill in Olympia on the other. And I simply wanted to get their side of the story. And I met with these umbrellas, the umbrella crew, the grandmas and grandpas, the wokes. You have the Black Panther Party, contingent. You've got Antifa
that
there.
Dude was
you got
white.
Trantifa.
Was it? Wait. What, that dude who said he's wearing the Black Panther thing, isn't he white?
I don't know if he's native or what. He definitely is not black. And then the best part is there was another white guy wearing a Black Panther Party patch. I mean, I don't know who's what anymore. There's just so many of these fringe groups that have emerged in Washington State. I mean, people keep talking about, mainstream media keep talking about the far right. When are they going to start talking about the far left? And that's what I'm seeing every single day, and that's why I record. So getting back to how do I deal with these situations? By the way, that guy broke my phone. He broke the screen on my phone, cost me $100 to replace it, whatever. But my point is, I just have to keep going. And I need to encourage more of my colleagues to go out there. But mainstream media keeps saying, it's not safe. It's not safe. Don't go near there. Don't go there. But if we don't go there to show this stuff, Victoria, it's almost like it never happened. And we can't hold these people accountable. We've got to keep showing this bad behavior because it keeps happening every single time. They're trying to gaslight, they're trying to change the narrative and say it's only the far left being harmful, when in reality, I'm seeing so much bad behavior, violence, crimes being committed by the far left at these events in front of law enforcement.
Yeah. Now, the cops know. They just don't say anything because they'll get fired. I mean, that would be, seriously. Wouldn't you rather work somewhere else where you're appreciated police officers? Okay, so it is the milieu in which Antifa and the Proud Boys and all those guys came together occasionally. And so that got you fired from Como. Tell us the story.
Oh, wow, we're really going back blast from the past here.
I know, but people were going to say something. Antifa John's going to put something out on Twitter, unless he's gone on radio silence because he's being sued by Andy No, and he'll say, he'll just gaslight everything. So tell us what's going on.
Yeah, about a year ago, I was at Como News. I was the lead reporter there covering crime and homelessness. So, I didn't get fired for the quality of my work. That wasn't the issue. Basically, my station caved to the pressure from the far left activists. This all started on a weekend. On my own time, I decided to drive to Olympia, Washington, where there was a quote-unquote Proud Boys conservative rally. And at Como, we had never covered a Proud Boys rally, at least on my watch when I was there. And the reason why I thought it was newsworthy was that, first of all, we never cover the Proud Boys. We keep on covering Antifa and showing them in a certain light. And I really wanted to know as a journalist, what were these men all about? Who are these quote-unquote far-right extremists? And I really wanted to find out what the real story was about. And a year prior, an Antifa member shot a Proud Boy in the ankle. So I wanted to see if anything would erupt. That's my job, to go there and just kind of be there in anticipation. I end up going there, and I start live tweeting this march, which lasted for about 20, 30 minutes. It started off with a prayer. You got a bunch of, folks holding Trump flags, Proud Boys with their masks, no violence whatsoever, tons of law enforcement. Then on top of that, you saw these Asian moms, Mexican grandmas there who are just conservatives and Republicans and Trump supporters marching with them through the streets of downtown Olympia. They were being heckled by a handful of, leftists, it appeared. And I just live tweeted the whole thing, and I said in the end, hey, it was kind of lame, nothing to see here. If you want to learn more about what these folks are about, go check out their table. And none of this aired on Como News. And no big deal that day, but the very next day, that's when the far left seized on this. And at the time, some of the Proud Boys were facing prosecution for the January 6th insurrection at the Capitol, and the far left accused me of not being hard enough, more critical of the Proud Boys. And I'm like, nothing happened. Anyway, long story short, my bosses saw that. There was get this, I was such a thorn in the side to the far left in this region that they started an online campaign to call in my station to have me fired. So my general manager and my news director then said, Jonathan, this is just too much pressure. And what they were saying is this could compromise our advertising, right? Because at the end of the day, we know that television news is a business at the end of the day. So we decided to part ways, and I got fired. And I'm like, okay, whatever. And in the end, just after a month and a half, I got this offer from Discovery Institute, and they said, we want you to continue your work. It's vital. It's important. I thank Discovery every single day for this opportunity. And it's really started this new chapter in my career. And I believe truly independent journalism, at least here in Washington State and across the country, this type of style of journalism is here to stay. And we need to expand this program. And that's what we're trying to do because everyone says it's needed.
It is needed. And you can thank Andrew Breitbart for that. He inspired an entire generation of citizen journalists, as he called them, to go out and take video. And I think more and more reporters, as you've pointed out, are doing that. One of the persons who tried to get you fired is so-called John the Lefty on Twitter. And I don't know if you know him or not, but he's the guy who was there he was there for sure when folks were chasing down Andy Ngo down in downtown Portland when they roughed him up and then he had to hide in a hotel. And he is also being sued by Andy Ngo. I believe that's true. And John the Lefty, I know you'll double check on that and you'll fact check me. We interviewed him before we knew he was involved in the Andy Ngo beatings, or at least one of them. And he was there when they dropped heavy objects from overpasses and all kinds of things. He's not a good person.
Well, I don't personally know John. But I actually went to the Andy Ngo trial. I covered that for the Post Millennial a few months ago, and John got off basically. And now Andy's going to be back in Portland. By the way, quick update at the end of this month for another trial. He's suing other members of Antifa that allegedly beat him up. So it's turned into this.
I think I want to go to that.
Yeah, civil situation now, but. Yeah, no, John is an interesting character. I don't want to spend too much time talking about him because I don't know him personally, but when I heard his testimony and, when he was there on trial, I mean, he's a very compelling character. And I want to give...
Oh, yeah, he's super smart.
Yeah, super smart. And I want to give Antifa credit in many ways. What Antifa has done is they've basically gotten the rest of America, or many politicians especially, to say that Antifa doesn't exist. But that's exactly how they're operating, right? In the shadows. And they've leveraged and
out in the open, in the
exactly, shadows. Right in plain sight. But they've mastered social media and technology, and unfortunately, a lot of conservatives, frankly, and we saw what happened with Parler, that failed social media platform. They don't know technology, and that's where Antifa has really seized the narrative and how they're able to still mobilize and be effective out there. And John's been one of the leaders. Look, I found out later on he tried to get me fired. I wasn't really following him, but now I know who he is and I know what he's all about.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And now everyone else does too. Well, Jonathan, you've been very generous with your time. I'll continue following you and talking about you and following your work. So where do you go from here? You are working for Discovery, and the Discovery Institute is really, really leaning into this with you. And where does your coverage go from here?
Well, I've been looking down on my phone right now. There's more breaking news happening, which I have to run to. So that's where I'm going next. There's a homeless encampment fire in downtown Seattle. The state has been warned about this so long, and they still haven't cleared it. But anyway, I digress. But as for where we go from here, we're trying to expand the program. Discovery Institute, like many think tanks, they look for results. They look for metrics. They look for measurables for success. And again, we have the proof of concept now. I'm so thankful they took this gamble, but others are now starting to notice as well, especially the politicians. We all know that they follow our stuff because I've done public disclosure requests showing that they keep talking about our coverage, how we really are a thorn in their side. So we know that we have to be here to really function as the fourth estate and watchdogs and just to do our jobs as journalists. So I'm not going anywhere for the time being.
Jonathan Choe, The Choe Show, Choe Show, at Choe Show on Twitter, and online fixhomelessness.org. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Adult in the Room podcast. To keep the programs you like to listen to, please rate this podcast with a fantastic 5 stars on your Apple Podcast app every time you listen, and give me a great review. Plus, of course, subscribe to the podcast. It makes a difference with the big tech algorithm and the big tech oligarchs, and it makes us easier to find. Please get in touch with me on all the big tech stuff. Yeah, we're still there. Using the names Victoria Taft or the Adult in the Room podcast on MeWe, Parler, Minds, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Thanks to 1A Cast for imaging, editing, and production. The fantastic song is Gospel by the March 4th Band of Portland, Oregon. Music for Antifa versus Mike Strickland is Ride or Die by Raps by RC. The Adult in the Room podcast is also a production of Flamingo Road Studios. Remember, head up, heart out, and strive to be the adult in the room. Till next time, mischief managed.